So let's talk about why there are no enlightened people or so-called enlightened human beings. So enlightenment is basically when the absolute truth of pure consciousness, which is here and now, awakens to itself. And the cosmos awakens to itself. That is enlightenment. So since the cosmos or the absolute truth or consciousness is the sole reality, there are no people actually at the absolute level. There appear to be people temporarily, and those people are those apparent people are the absolute truth of consciousness, taking the disguise and form of those people. In fact, the absolute truth of consciousness is taking the disguise and form of every piece of creation, every pebble, every twig, every ant, every leaf, every star, planet, galaxy, asteroid, etc. So the one or the absolute truth is taking the form of the many or creation. So every human being is just a piece of creation basically, and every individual human being is a unique expression of the absolute truth. And enlightenment is when the absolute truth realizes that it is the absolute truth. Even to say it realizes it is not strictly true, because it already is the absolute truth, which is pretending to be something other than the absolute truth as a form of Leela. So it was not the Gautama, the Buddha, that was enlightened. It was the absolute truth that woke up to itself in the form of Gautama. It was not Krishna or Jesus as the apparent individual human beings that were enlightened. It was just that the absolute truth was aware of itself in the form of Jesus and Krishna, and all the thousands of enlightened beings that there have been, thousands of so-called enlightened beings that there have been through the course of history. So the absolute truth basically imposes limitations and separation upon itself and deludes itself into being something other than the absolute truth in the form of the ego. And the suffering produced by the misidentification of the absolute truth with the ego drives one deeper into oneself and discover that one is the absolute truth, and that the entirety of creation is the absolute truth appearing as the entirety of creation. So in every human being that has attained enlightenment, it is not the human being that has attained enlightenment. It is enlightenment that has ceased to create deliberate unenlightenment in the form of a so-called enlightened human being. So, since the absolute truth is appearing as the entirety of creation or the cosmos or the universe, there is no creation or cosmos or universe. There is just pure consciousness, the absolute truth, Shiva, appearing to itself as creation. So, enlightenment can only exist when there is delusion. And delusion is basically the idea of being something other than the absolute truth. So, the eternal, ever present absolute truth first imagines itself to be something other than the absolute truth, and then via an epic quest of conflict, struggle, and adventure, it removes this hypnosis that it imposes upon itself of being something other than the absolute truth. So, it's a dual process. Step one is imposition of limitation upon self, and step two is the process of dissolution of limitation. So that process of limitation, or the process of removal of limitation, ends in what we call enlightenment. But when enlightenment is attained, it is realized that enlightenment was the only thing that there ever was, and that delusion was a dream that the absolute truth was dreaming to play hide and seek with itself. So from the perspective of the deluded separate identity. The end of the separate identity is enlightenment. So the statement "I am enlightened" is a meaningless statement, because if enlightenment has happened, then there is no longer you. So many so-called gurus who claim to be enlightened are most likely charlatans, unless they clarify with absolute precision that it is the absolute truth that is playing this game of hide and seek with itself, of apparent non-enlightenment, the journey to enlightenment and enlightenment, which is just a big dream, the cosmic dream of Maya, basically. So the upshot is that there are no enlightened people. There is just enlightenment, the suchness of the present moment, pure consciousness, irrefutable, undeniable, instantaneous.